If you're looking to have DeFi or decentralized finance explained to you so simply that a third grader could understand it, but also strategically enough that you could actually use this to make life-changing passive income, then you're in the right spot. Hey there, my name is Adam Winnig, and I've been involved in cryptocurrencies since 2013. And in this video series, I'm going to walk you through A to Z, everything that you need to know about decentralized finance in a really easy to understand manner. There'll be 4 parts. The first part is going to be all about the DeFi basics, the foundations, understanding the lingo, which we're going to cover in this video. The second part, we're actually going to get in and start covering how do you actually connect to this new world of decentralized finance. We're going to be talking about MetaMask and blockchain explorers and DeFi dashboards. And then the part 3, we're actually going to be talking about how do you actually use decentralized finance. That's where we're going to be talking about DEXs and swapping and lending and borrowing, staking, liquidity providing, bridging, auto compounders. And then the last part, after you understand this, is we're going to talk about the actual strategy. What are some of my favorite yield farming strategies? What are some of my favorite liquidity providing strategies, passive income strategies? All of that's going to come in the part 4. So make sure that you stay tuned. So in part 1, we're going to be talking about the basics. So we're going to cover what is DeFi, what are dApps, what are stablecoins, what are gas fees, what are layer 1s, and then the different components that make up these layer 1 ecosystems. So let's go ahead and let's dive in. First things first, what is DeFi? Well, to break it down, DeFi is simply decentralized finance, which I'm sure you could have guessed at this point. And if you look at that, it's broken down into 2 different words, decentralized and then finance, right? Now, you have to first understand traditional finance or TradFi, also called centralized finance or CeFi. And once you understand this, you'll better understand DeFi. Now, you're probably familiar with CeFi. That's pretty much what you probably used your entire life, right? This is where we use things like centralized parties, things like banks, things like governments, things like middlemen to transact payments between people, something like a Venmo or something like a PayPal, where it's not necessarily peer-to-peer that we're transacting. We're always sending it through some centralized party, like a bank in this case. Now, what DeFi does is it moves all of the things that we do in traditional finance, like stock exchanges, banks, payment processors, lending and borrowing, all of this, but it brings it to a decentralized world where it's owned by no one, but it's controlled by everyone at the same time. And DeFi will actually democratize banking, similar to the way that the internet democratized information. And what really is decentralization? Well, decentralization simply means that there's no single point of power, failure, or authority. And it basically distributes the responsibility to many parties. And to get you to understand this better, you can think of Wikipedia as the best example currently. Wikipedia has thousands and thousands of people around the globe that can fact check or that can edit the articles on Wikipedia. And so it's governed by a decentralized manner. Now, I don't know about you, but I would much rather have thousands of different fact checkers versus just one centralized party or one centralized team. Say, for example, like CNN, that's, they have their own agenda and only their people are able to accurately say what is right and what is wrong. Okay. So to put it into simpler terms, DeFi essentially allows you to become your own bank. And for the first time ever, to actually control your money, to be able to operate borderlessly, where you can send money freely across anybody across the globe. And it gives you access to a 24/7 global economy. You no longer have to wait till it's the weekday to call up your banker and then pay an expensive transaction fee only to send the wire to somebody that takes multiple days and hopefully the transaction actually goes through. And you got to actually think, why do these banks and centralized finance systems actually want you to save your money? Well, they want you to do that so that way they can use your money to go do things like lending and borrowing and all these different sort of activities that we're going to talk about. So it gets you to have the power that the centralized banks would normally have. And this is the beautiful world of decentralized finance. Now, decentralized finance uses something called smart contracts instead of using centralized parties. So to put that into your head to what that actually means, smart contracts are simply computer code that can't be changed but can be seen by everyone. So it's a very transparent agreement. Okay, just like you have agreements or you have contracts in the real world, Now you can just have them in the form of computer code. So let's say, for example, that you want to send a transaction. Instead of you wiring this money, it goes to the bank, the third party or the centralized system, and then your bank goes and sends that money to the person that you actually want to send it to. In the world of decentralized finance, we have smart contracts, which is basically just an agreement. It's a piece of code that says, hey, I'm sending this money, it's coming to this person, and it's going directly peer to peer. This is the world of decentralized finance. Now, one thing that you'll need to understand is once you understand Ethereum, you'll be able to better understand the rest of decentralized finance. And Ethereum is simply what we call a layer one or a smart contract platform. And the best way to think about this is think of it kind of like an app store. Ethereum's like this platform that people can build these decentralized apps on top of, or these decentralized banks on top of, that allows us to do all of the normal financial activity that we do in a traditional financial world, but allows us to do it in this whole new world called decentralized finance. So my next point here is, what are dApps? So you'll hear something called dApps. It simply stands for decentralized apps. And these dApps are simply these decentralized financial applications that are built on top of blockchains, okay, like Ethereum or Polygon or Avalanche. And examples of these different apps would be something like Aave. Aave is an dApp or an app that's built on top of Ethereum, also built on top of Polygon and on top of Avalanche. And essentially what it allows you to do is it allows you to loan your money out to other people. And it actually also allows you to take a loan instantly. There's many other examples of dApps like decentralized exchanges, which would work similar to how a centralized exchange like Binance or KuCoin or maybe Charles Schwab or E-Trade would work, but it works in a decentralized peer-to-peer fashion. So again, your money's not being held by some third party. Now, the next thing that we need to talk about is stablecoins. Stablecoins are an essential component of decentralized finance, and stablecoins basically allow us to participate in the world of cryptocurrency without the crazy volatility that we'd normally see in cryptocurrencies. So stablecoins generically are pegged one-to-one to some normal fiat currency. For example, it could be pegged one-to-one to the US dollar. So you could still have your funds inside of the crypto ecosystem or the crypto world, but don't have to participate in the volatility because you're using a stablecoin, a coin that's pegged to the dollar. Now, with that being said, there's three different types of stablecoins that you need to understand. One, which is currently probably the most popular, is a fiat-backed stablecoin. This would be things like USDT, Tether, or USDC, or BUSD. These are all examples of fiat-backed stablecoins. Now, what does that mean? That means for that every one Tether or every one USDC or every one BUSD that's created, they need to have $1 like equivalent backing it. So they need to either have $1 or some dollar like equivalent backing this in order to maintain the peg. Now, the second type of stablecoins is something called a crypto-backed stablecoin. And this would be an example like DAI, for example. In order for you to obtain the DAI stablecoin, there needs to be an equal amount of a cryptocurrency backing it. So that could be like Bitcoin or Ethereum that's backing that to maintain that one-to-one peg. Then the third type of stablecoin is something called an algorithmic stablecoin. The most well-known example of this is something called UST. And basically the way that this works is it uses an algorithm to keep its peg one-to-one to the dollar. It actually basically burns its native token called Luna anytime more UST is created. Now, the next thing that you'll need to understand is what are gas fees. And gas fees are kind of like transaction fees. Anytime you do some sort of transaction in the decentralized finance world, you're going to pay some sort of gas fee. And you can think of this kind of like when you drive your car, right? In order to get from point A to point B, you need to pay some sort of gas fee. And the same thing in decentralized finance. To move your money from one point to another, you need to pay some sort of gas or transaction fees. And you actually pay these gas or transaction fees anytime you're making some sort of deposit or you're sending money somewhere or you're swapping for another cryptocurrency. You're always going to pay these gas fees. And the interesting thing is these gas fees are always changing. You may be wondering, well, why are these gas fees always changing? Well, they're always changing because just like gas prices in the real world, it's dependent on supply and demand. So if there's a ton of demand on a certain chain at a certain time, then this can cause gas prices to get astronomically high. Like we've recently seen here on Ethereum, they've gotten so large because there's so much demand. And while gas fees are cheaper on other chains, which will probably be interacting with more, it's generally because there's less demand. Now, gas fees are always denominated in something called gwei. And what gwei is, it's basically Ethereum just denominated smaller. So just like how we have $1 and it's broken down into 100 cents, or just like how we have Bitcoin, which is broken down to 100 million Satoshis, well, Ethereum is also broken down to 1 billion gwei. So I believe it's 1 billion gwei make up one Ethereum. So you'll see the prices actually being priced in gwei. Now, with that being said, you can come to sites like ethgas.watch and you can actually check out the different gas prices. So here you can easily see that just like how if you're paying for shipping, you can pay for slower shipping or faster shipping, the same thing when you're dealing with decentralized finance transactions, you can also decide if you want the transaction to go through slower, it's going to be cheaper, or you can push it through faster, but it's going to cost you more gwei, or it's going to cost you more Ethereum, or going to cost you more Avalanche, whatever chain that you're natively interacting on. And you can use a little tool like this where you can basically use like a gas tracker where if the price of the gas fees get low enough, it'll actually just send you an email notification. Now, primarily we've talked about Ethereum up until this point because it is the number one smart contract or layer one platform that's out there right now. But there's also this whole different world of layer ones or smart contract platforms, which you'll hear being used interchangeably. These are just the native blockchain that these different decentralized apps are built on top of. And so you'll see that there's Avalanche, there is Polygon, there's the Binance Smart Chain, there's Terra Luna, there's Phantom, and there's more and more blockchains that are popping up all of the time. And each of these operate somewhat similarly. They're a blockchain that has decentralized apps built on top of it. Okay. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is the different components of these ecosystems. Now, you can think of these different layer ones, each having their own little ecosystem that make up their little world of decentralized finance. And basically, they're each going to have a money market. And this is what's going to allow you to basically post your assets as collateral and lend them out to other people like a bank would, and also to take on loans in a decentralized manner. Without any credit checks, without any social security, without any proof of income, anything. You're able to take loans pretty much instantly as long as you have collateral. The second component is something called a DEX, or an automated money market. A lot of the times you'll just hear it referred to as a DEX, which is a decentralized exchange. So just like we have KuCoin or Binance or Coinbase, we also have these decentralized exchanges where you're basically able to trade basically peer-to-peer through these things called liquidity pools, which we'll talk about later on. And I don't want to confuse you because we'll talk about that later on, just giving you the basics here. And then the last thing, component that'll make up these ecosystems is something called an auto compounder, which again, we'll talk about how to use these more later on. So this is the basics. Okay, now you want to continue over to the second video, which we're going to talk about how do you connect to this world of decentralized finance. We're going to talk about MetaMask, how to set it up, what are blockchain explorers, and how do DeFi dashboards actually work so you can see everything that's actually happening inside of your decentralized bank. So go ahead, continue over to part 2.